Elena mentioned Vanguard 9, a classified federal access point requiring biometric clearance. It's where high-level agents are trained in how to use the Sentinel protocol. Entry isn't granted without direct authorization from Central Command in Capitol Hill. The older officer, the one who had laughed earlier, wasn't laughing anymore. Sweat glistened on his forehead. His younger colleague, once cocky and sure, now stared down at the floor as though trying to vanish into it. Elena remained composed. "You ran the badge through the national database," she said softly. "But you didn't call the number on the back to verify my clearance. You ignored my first warning before laying hands on me. You didn't follow procedure. You reacted based on assumption and let your bias lead the way. Now, every word you're saying is being recorded as you continue to violate the federal rights of a senior official." Each sentence landed like a cold blade. And the worst part for them? Everything she said sounded absolutely right. There was no justification left. Only consequences. The camera on their uniforms kept rolling, capturing every second. "Do you still want to pretend you're in control of this situation?" Elena asked calmly. "Or would you rather answer the phone before this gets worse?" She gestured to the vibrating division, the steel table. The screen flashed one word in bold: Federal. Each buzz was a countdown. The weight of truth pressing down on the room. But no one moved. No one had the courage to pick up the call. They were frozen, gripped by panic as Elena quietly assumed command. "Return my phone now," she instructed. The younger agent, no longer smug, nodded with trembling hands and passed it to her without a word. Facing the group, Elena unlocked the screen with a swipe and tapped accept. She put the call on speaker. The deep voice echoed through the room. "Where is he? The source is missing. The entire operation's integrity is at risk." Sergeant Monroe tried to speak. "Excuse me, who is this?" "This is Director Adrian Kowalski, Federal Bureau of Intelligence." "And who am I speaking to?" The sergeant's expression twisted into dread, but before he could reply, Elena stepped in. "Sir, I'm currently being held at Precinct 17, taken without justification, escorted under force, and denied identity verification. My credentials were called fake. All of it is on record. Your agent's body cams and internal station surveillance." There was a pause. Then the voice returned, sharp and irrefutable. "In 5 minutes, the Attorney General will call this precinct directly. Until then, do not move, do not speak, and do not touch her again." The line went dead. One of the officers stumbled into a chair, pale and silent. Another mumbled an apology that barely escaped his lips. Monroe, trapped between wounded ego and rising fear, whispered, "This has to be a setup." Elena didn't respond. She turned her attention back to the facts. "Check your visitor log," she instructed firmly. "You'll see I entered the building with clearance under a federal code. My vehicle is registered under a protected diplomatic protocol." Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, sealed device. The kind issued only to Level 7 field operatives. They hadn't even searched her point one by one. Their mistakes became undeniable. Not only had they detained her illegally, they had endangered a critical intelligence mission through blind prejudice. Just as silence reclaimed the room, another phone rang. This time, it wasn't Elena's phone that rang. It was the old landline on the sergeant's desk, an outdated gray handset, blinking like a warning light. Monroe looked at it as if it might explode. No one moved. Elena lifted an eyebrow. "You may want to answer that." His palms still damp with sweat, the sergeant slowly picked up the receiver. His response was barely a whisper. "Yes, sir." "Yes, understood." When he set the phone down, all the arrogance was drained from his face. "The Department of Justice is stepping in," he mumbled. "They're sending a federal supervisor tonight." Elena reached into her blazer. From the inside pocket, she pulled out a sleek pen. She pressed a hidden button. A crisp, clear audio recording began to play. Within seconds, the room echoed with their own voices, mocking, threatening, ignoring her warnings. Everything had been captured via a covert FBI surveillance mic. They had overlooked it entirely. "Do you recognize your voices?" Elena asked quietly. "Because this recording is going straight to the Oversight Committee. This is no longer internal, but it's evidence." The officers stood motionless. The younger one wiped away tears. The older removed his cap in shame. Monroe walked out silently, his step slow and heavy. He didn't say a word. That very moment, a new figure appeared in the doorway, a tall man in a dark suit, a federal badge hanging visibly from his neck. He had arrived quickly, too quickly. Elena tilted her head slightly. Did you hear the recording? I've got more to say. The man nodded. Of course, Director. Elena took a breath. From this moment on, she declared, this precinct is under federal review. In the makeshift briefing room, agents had gathered. Some took notes. Others observed in silence. Elena stood tall, the red indentations from the handcuffs still visible on her wrists. N01 interrupted her. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. That IT was reverent. She scanned the room, not with anger, but with unwavering calm. Then, with a voice shaped by years of field work and the weight of responsibility, she spoke. I'm not here out of pride. I'm not here because my feelings were hurt. I'm here because what happened tonight wasn't a one-time error. It was a symptom of something deeper. She stepped forward. You saw a Latina woman without a badge or backup, and you assumed the worst. Worse than that, you acted on that assumption without checking a single fact. You called me a liar, a criminal. You cuffed me, disregarded federal procedures, and sabotaged a classified mission. All in the name of a warped sense of authority. Some officers lowered their heads. Others inhaled deeply, the weight of shame pressing. N01 spoke. N01 could defend what had happened. I've asked myself, Elena continued, what if I hadn't been in this position? What if I were just another citizen? No rank, no connections, no way to prove my innocence. Where would I be right now? She turned as Sergeant Monroe re-entered the room. His badge was gone. He had been relieved of duty just moments earlier. Elena looked him in the eye. The issue isn't just who placed me in handcuffs, she said. The real problem is everything that allowed it to happen, without pause, without scrutiny, without question. She had devoted her entire career to defending the nation, only to be mistaken for a criminal simply because she was a woman of color, alone, on a deserted street at night. Though she wore no badge on her chest, her presence alone demanded respect. She didn't need to shout. Her stillness, her confidence, was louder than any siren screaming through the night. Deputy Director of National Intelligence Elena Morales had spent more than 20 years exposing corruption, confronting organized crime, and protecting innocent lives from within the shadows. But on that rainy evening, beneath flickering street lamps and muffled voices in the drizzle, her years of service vanished in an instant. The only thing that stood out, her skin tone, her solitude, her failure to match what authority is supposed to look like. Have you ever experienced something like this? Let us know in the comments, and where you're watching from. That night, as police approached her unmarked federal car, they didn't see a veteran agent. They saw someone who didn't belong. Without a second thought, they slapped handcuffs on her wrists, not because of what she'd done, but because of who they thought she was. They chuckled among themselves, proud of having caught someone. Then, a phone buzzed at a single call that would tear down their smug confidence, end careers, and permanently alter the legacy of that precinct. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with modest homes and tidy front yards. Streetlights shimmered against the wet pavement. A black vehicle sat still in front of an ordinary house, its motor silent beneath the rhythm of the rain. Inside, Elena Morales stood motionless, her stance as firm as carved stone. At a T-44, her face bore the traces of long years in the field. Dressed casually, she gave off an unmistakable air of silent authority. No one would have guessed that this calm, composed woman was leading secret intelligence operations and overseeing internal investigations. She hadn't ended up there by accident. She had received an anonymous tip, one that pointed to corruption inside the very station that would later detain her. She had arranged to meet with a reliable source. But before she could even exit her vehicle, two police cruisers boxed her in. A rookie officer, hand poised near his weapon, demanded her ID, his tone clipped and suspicious. She handed it over, unshaken. Another officer, older and disgruntled, his oversized uniform draped awkwardly over his frame, held her credentials like a punchline to a bad joke. Sure, he muttered, smirking. And I'm the mayor. She didn't argue. She swallowed her protest. Instead, she asked quietly, "Are you recording this?" The red light blinked on his body cam. The younger one sneered. "Everything's on tape. sweetheart, then barked orders and threats as if she were just another street criminal. They didn't even run her license plate to them. She was just another brown woman in a sketchy vehicle at the wrong hour. Inside the precinct, flickering fluorescence buzzed over desks buried in outdated files and cold coffee stains. Elena was led into a small interrogation room, its bare concrete walls soaked in tension and disregard. Though she warned them calmly, her voice steady. "You're about to make a grave mistake." Her words fell into a void of arrogance. Sergeant Dale Monroe, a heavy-set man with a thick gray mustache and the swagger of someone used to being obeyed, looked at her like she didn't belong. "Deputy Director of what, again?" he asked with a smirk. "What's someone like you doing around here without backup or a badge?" Then he turned to the two younger officers beside him. Sharing a mocking laugh like schoolboys playing Detective Point One rapped his knuckles against the table, leaned in, and asked, "What's your real name?" The others scribbled random notes, as if this were a stage play and she was just a minor character. Not a single one of them verified her credentials, and no one even questioned if they might be wrong. Her accent, her calm, her silence, twisted into false evidency flies. Elena glanced up at the wall clock. Each passing second pulled her further away from her informant, and from a covert operation that could fall apart at any moment. Their careless assumptions weren't just insulting. They were dangerous, the agents discussed reporting her to immigration. Her resolve hardened. She had been trained for moments like this. Observe, wait, strike only when it counted. And that moment came when one of them tossed her government ID on the table and scoffed. "This is fake." Elena leaned forward slowly, her tone flat, unflinching. "Did you run that through the national system, or just your local files?" She paused. "Without a federal check, your accusations mean nothing." The room froze. Sergeant Monroe's confident stare faltered. His illusion of control began to crack. Elena stood from her chair, deliberately. "I didn't come here to save your reputations," she said quietly. "But you have no idea what you're messing with." For the first time, the agents hesitated. Point One averted his gaze. Another reached for the computer to open a wider database, only to be stopped by Monroe's bark. "I'm in charge here," he snapped. "I don't need some woman telling me how to run my department." But it was too late. She had already lit the fuse. In the next room, a cell phone buzzed. Again, more urgently. The screen read, "National Bureau Director." Panic cracked through the pride that had filled the room moments ago. Shaky fingers re-entered her badge number, this time into a restricted federal app that none of them had touched before. And then, silence. The results appeared. Full name, Elena Morales. Clearance code, 94276. Position, Deputy Director, Division of Internal Oversight, National Bureau of Intelligence. I think we have a situation," the younger agent whispered. Sergeant Monroe couldn't even lift his head. The woman they had mocked, dismissed, and shackled was now revealed as one of the highest-ranking intelligence officials in the country. That he struggled to hold his ground. "But how do we know it's not all fake?" he muttered, voice breaking. "Anyone can forge credentials these days, make a website, fabricate an ID. If someone like me, with rank, clearance, and years of service, can be silenced this easily, how many others have been silenced without a trace?" Elena paused. "What you call protocol often hides behind a uniform to disguise simple prejudice. If we don't challenge that, if we don't dismantle it from within, then we're not upholding the law, that we're just enabling its abuse." A crack had formed in this station. A fracture too deep to seal, too real to ignore. Hours later, as federal agents began to evacuate the building, Elena stepped into the night. The rain had stopped, but puddles shimmered beneath the amber glow off the street lamps that a few neighbors watched from behind curtains and fences, their faces curious but silent. There were no cameras, no press conferences, just a woman walking alone, free, steady, dignified, having dismantled arrogance with nothing more than truth in a voice that refused to bend. Across the street, a black car waited quietly. From it stepped an older woman, her silver hair tied back, eyes searching, anxious. That it was Elena's mother, summoned by a coded message only they would understand. "I'm okay," Elena whispered. "Wait for me outside." They embraced wordlessly, no need for explanations. That night, after taking down cartels, confronting corruption, and exposing injustice from within, Elena finally let go. Silent tears streaked down her face. They hurt you, her mother whispered, fingertips brushing the red marks on her wrists. Not enough to stop me, Elena replied, her voice trembling. Before getting into the car, she turned for one last look at the station, not with rage, but with fierce resolve. It's not over, Mom, she said softly. This is just the beginning. Inside the car, her phone screen lit up. Over 30 unread messages. Colleagues, federal prosecutors, journalists, attorneys, all waiting for a comment or a reaction. Instead, Elena opened the audio recorder app, tapped record, and spoke just 3 words: send everything through. The file was immediately forwarded to the Office of Ethical Oversight in Washington. Don't keep this story quiet, she said aloud. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and started the car. The city around her looked unchanged, but deep within its systems, change had already begun. 2 weeks later, Precinct 17 shut its doors. That a sign was posted. Federal investigation in progress. Inside, the station sat still, files scattered, monitors dark, silence heavier than before. Elena's recording had set off a chain reaction. Within days, 3 officers were suspended. 1 resigned, and Sergeant Monroe was arrested for obstructing a federal operation. The media covered the story only in fragments, an unnamed federal official challenging local abuse of power, but in hushed voices, in homes and community halls, a different story was told. She never shouted, one witness recalled, but she made the walls tremble. Public opinion was split. Some questioned how so much power could rest with one person. But for many, especially within the Latino communities, Elena Morales had become something more. A symbol, proof that systems could be shaken from within. On a public radio show, a civil rights attorney concluded, this wasn't an exception. It was the rule, finally exposed. The only difference was that I had proof. How many others have none at all? I stepped away from the spotlight. No press conference, no interviews, no fame. Instead, I redirected my focus toward detention protocol reform and anti-bias training. Eventually, I was appointed as an advisor to the National Program for Police Ethics. My experience was no longer an isolated footnote. It became mandatory curriculum in law enforcement academies. Still, I knew justice wasn't finished. Some officers continued to resist change. Many would always act on instinct, not integrity. But something, at least, had started to shift. One afternoon, while sorting through case reports, I found a handwritten letter from the young officer who had once placed me in handcuffs. I have no excuse, it read. Thanks to you, I chose to resign. I don't want to be part of a system I don't even understand. Thank you for opening my eyes. I held the letter for a moment. No tears and no smile. Just a quiet nod before tucking it away. There were other battles ahead, but for the first time in years, I felt like I wouldn't be fighting them alone. My story never graced magazine covers. It never became the focus of a documentary. And yet, its echo traveled down hallways where policy is made, through precincts where routine arrests had gone unquestioned. It became a story whispered in classrooms, in neighborhoods, in homes. During bureau training, my audio recording became a case study, and far beyond Washington, in places where abuse wore a badge, my name was passed from voice to voice. Just a Latin American woman, known more for her silence than her fame, who dismantled an empire of arrogance with one phone call that I kept working in the background. Never for recognition, only for change. Each report I read, each agent I mentored, was another crack in a wall once thought unbreakable. One evening, at a quiet restaurant, a soft-spoken waiter approached. Excuse me, he said shyly. Were you the one from District 17? I nodded. My cousin works there, he continued. He told me what happened. I just wanted to thank you. Sometimes it feels like no one's standing up. I smiled, said nothing. Later, I found a note he'd left with the check. Thank you for not staying silent that night. That night, under a soft drizzle, without an escort, without a badge, just a file under my arm on a steady pace, I walked past a school mural that a woman stood painted in front of a police station, pen in hand. Beneath it, the words, "If this story moved you, share it, because silence has never saved anyone." I smiled, not because it was my story anymore, but because now it belonged to all of us.